But you DM'd me the other day. Could you let the people know what you wanted to talk about and what we're here for?
Yeah, so you talked to Matt Walsh recently. You had
Friend of the
a
stream.
video a while ago where you did like a review of like a thing that came out from Media Matters. And I happened to review your video doing that, as well as like Vosh's, TYT's, Majority Reports. And then you brought it up when you went and talked to Matt Walsh this time. And I have like a huge disagreement with the way that Media Matters framed that entire situation. I want to be clear. I
like the
no
way they wrote the article.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not a fan of Matt Walsh in any way. Like most of my debates are about gender and like explaining how gender works and why trans women are women through like a very real linguistic lens, and I spend most of my time debating why kids with gender dysphoria should be transitioning at younger ages and why this is a good thing and why most people are just spreading misinformation about this stuff. So I am in no means a fan of Matt Walsh whatsoever, and I don't support his crusade against trans people or trans kids. But the article from Media Matters was
just
about
don't be too mean. He is a friend of the stream.
Okay, fair enough. But I do have an issue with the way the Media Matters wrote this article about him, where they're trying to make it out as though he's advocating for 16-year-old girls to get pregnant, and that as though they should be getting pregnant by adult men as well. People like Vosh frame this as like him being a pedophile. Same with Majority Report and other platforms, and it was like the issues that I have with Matt Walsh and the way that he puts out misinformation and the way he kind of leaves out context was the same issue that I had with all of them doing the same thing back to him. And so when you asked him, well, hey, you are in favor of like 16-year-olds getting pregnant and being adults and all of this shit, I felt like this was a little bit misframed from how that actually happened. It was like the article was written about a radio show that he did a long time ago and stuff that he said there.
In like 2013, 2014.
Yeah. And it was
so my question was about, I've been seeing him talk. He's been like one of the pioneers of calling trans people pedos for wanting to quote unquote indoctrinate children and whatnot. And he's been quoted as saying multiple times that, you know, these types of people, they're children. They're just simply children, and talking to them about this stuff is a form of grooming, pedophilia, whatever, right? And if that was the case, my question was, why in the past would you advocate for these types of things being sort of natural and normal when it comes to relationships? For people this young, even including sexual ones, where you can even possibly, where people can get pregnant for the same exact age of people. Why would you consistently call these people children when referring to their interactions with trans people and, in his air quote, trans ideology, but constantly advocate for the idea of these people being this age throughout society, through the history of society, being adults who can be expected to make adult decisions if you give them the leeway and opportunity to. I didn't call him a pedophile at any point, even though I know you didn't.
You didn't. You are correct.
Okay, yeah, I didn't call him a pedophile at any point in time. I don't think I even referred to him being a pedophile or wanting to impregnate children. I mean, that was my question. You typically say these people are children when referring to trans people, but these people can easily be adults when referring to things that usually conservatives like pregnancy and marriage and jobs and whatnot. So what was the problem?
So you did mention as well that that he advocated for 16-year-olds to get married and get pregnant because he does say that like they're practically adults. In his video where he talks about this, he says they're adults who can make decisions Nobody can convince me otherwise. But he also goes on to say that like they shouldn't make these decisions until they're 18. And his issue is that they're like people treat them like they're kids until they're 25, but that like they're capable of making these decisions. They just shouldn't until they're 18. And so he still has this like belief that they should wait until they're 18 to be able to make long-term decisions about their lives. And I think most of us believe to some extent, like, yeah, like 16-year-olds are capable of deciding whether or not to have kids with, whether or not to have sex with people. And they're able to make like a lot more decisions for themselves, but it's on a scale where like we think they have faculties to consent to things. We just want them to wait until they're 18 because they're still like going to school. They have like a lot more things that they should be getting done before they're making long-term decisions of that sort and consenting to things of that sort. And even in your review afterwards, you still kind of stuck by the point that when he says like, yeah, I was never saying that like they can that they should make these decisions to like get married or get pregnant at 16. You kind of stuck by that in your review of it as well.
It's my thing is it's less of an idea of it's less of an idea of should and more of an idea of can. Like if we say these people can make decisions about whether or not to take puberty blockers, he will disagree. If we say if somebody says 16-year-olds can make the decision to be impregnated, then he'll agree with that. Whether or not he thinks that he should, he believes that they can. And he believes that these people are adults who can make adult decisions like that.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I agree with that hypocrisy part of it. It was more so the part where you're adding in that they can like, or I guess, yeah, that because.
Well, I think I said that you said in quote that these people can make decisions. They are adults who can make these decisions. I don't think I said that he wants all 16-year-old girls to be impregnated or like included adults in there. I think it specifically stipulated that he said specifically with like other like 16, 17-year-olds. He said specifically that these people are when talking on his radio show, he said that these people he caught himself calling 17-year-olds children, and then he corrected himself and he says adults. These are adults. When talking about a 17-year-old boy, he was like adult man who can make these type of decisions, like go to like to go to work, because he's also super lax on child labor. He believes that child labor laws should be amended. He doesn't believe in the idea of like adolescence. I mean, in several of his writings that he's made on this, he's talked about the idea of adolescence being a modern plague, and that these people can start making decisions like this younger than 18. And I think he even called it, yeah, in quote, while the poor middle class mothers and fathers struggle to make ends meet, we legally prohibit teenagers from working and helping their family financially until they reach the frivolous threshold of 16. So it's not even like the word arbitrary. He uses specifically the word frivolous.
Okay, yeah, I mean, if you're saying that it's not about the should and it is just about the can, I guess I don't necessarily disagree with that. That wasn't really what I took away from it when I was watching it. But if that's, and I could totally be wrong, but if that's
I don't know, I just don't really feel like these.
I don't know that I have much of a disagreement then.
Okay. Well, I mean, when it comes to so we have that. When it comes to the should question, I mean, even his idea of like, I don't know, I think his idea of should is different than like other things. It's a really light shouldn't. It's not like a really strong, I'm super against this type of shouldn't, because he believes that these people are of age to make these type of decisions. It'd just probably be best that they didn't type things. But he's even advocated for the idea that child pregnancy when you're 16, 17 is not necessarily in and of itself a problem. And it's that they're unmarried is the real problem. Like doesn't
Yeah,
sound like
sure.
a very big shirt. Like doesn't sound like a very big like condemnation to me. It just seems like an inconvenience more than anything else, which I think is a
Yeah,
much larger problem.
he does say at one point in that video that like the problem isn't necessarily child pregnancy, but out of wedlock pregnancy. But then he goes on to say, like, I'm not advocating for like 16-year-olds to get pregnant at all. Or I think he says it 2 or 3 times. Like, I don't think 16-year-olds should get pregnant, or I don't think people should get pregnant before 18. And so that was like part of my issue with the way that Media Matters did this, is that they took a bunch of quotes from him. But if you watch the video, he gives a ton of caveats to those quotes and explains farther past that, to where his overall point was that people are treated like children until they're 25, and meaning like until they get out of college, which I agree with. I think that people should wait until they have degrees and they have their life together and they have careers and they're kind of settled before they start getting married and having kids and making those sorts of decisions. But his issue was that, yes, we wait until people are 25 and we should start treating them like adults at 18 because they're capable of being treated as adults at 16. We just have societal barriers to where
I don't know. And I mean, he can say 16, but he's been also quoted before that I quoted up there that you can, if you expect a 13-year-old to act like a 23-year-old, they will.
I've heard him say this before. I think I agree with this to some extent. I know a bunch of kids who were immigrants and their parents didn't speak a lick of English, and so their kids had to do everything for them, all of their bank stuff, all of the all of the transactions at stores, do all this shit. Those were the most mature kids I've ever met in my life. They acted like full-grown adults. They were kind of forced into that, and that's not convenient. That's not good. We kind of in America, thankfully, allow kids to be kids for a long period of time and have fun, and we're very privileged.
Do you think that Matt Walsh would think that that's not good?
I don't know. Again, I'm not really advocating for Matt Walsh's like that he's like a good character, more so that I feel like
I'm just explaining why I think what I think about this, because I don't think that he would think that's bad, because he's also quoted in saying, quote, in the same writing where he claimed that adolescence was a modern plague, he said, quote, I started working when I was 13 mowing lawns at a competitive price. Little did I know that I was a victim of oppressive child labor. If I had realized then, maybe I would have told my parents, and they likely would have responded by saying something like, yeah, and why shouldn't a child do some labor? End quote. I just don't think these are things that he would really disagree with that strongly. I mean, I think in public when he's at conferences, he would say things like, well, yeah, I'm really not against this, and not dig into it like too far. But I really just don't think these, if it would happen that much, or it would happen like that, I just don't think that he would really care that much. But when it comes to trans issues, this guy is like dedicating his entire life to it.
Yeah, and I agree with the hypocrisy between his positions. It's more so the positions being taken to mean something different than what I think he's saying at the time within context. Like, we take a lot of these quotes of him saying something like, oh, 13-year-olds will act like a 23-year-old if they're treated like a 23-year-old. That's when we're putting that in the context of, also he says that 16-year-olds are pretty much adults and could consent to getting married and these sorts of things. Like, when we're putting all of these quotes together, it makes it sound like he's saying things that he's not. I don't think he's actually saying. And when you go look at each instance of what he's saying within context, it's the things that he's saying are fairly agreeable and normal statements.
I wouldn't necessarily say they're very agreeable and normal. I mean, I think, like you said, I also believe
I brought up reasons why I agree with these, and you haven't disagreed with my reasoning for agreeing with those.
All right. Okay. Well, here. I think that I have. Well, it's more like in the context of the way that he's saying it, and the subject matter, and what he's advocating for the stuff inside of. I think it just builds a picture of his character and the things that he agrees and disagrees with that he hasn't gone into fully. And you also agree that there is a hypocrisy here.
Yes, I like I said, I agree with the hypocrisy part. But when we're talking about whether or not a 13-year-old will act like a 23-year-old. Yes, I gave like an explanation of why I think this makes sense and why I've seen this within my life. And when I explain this, most people turn around and say, "Oh yeah, I've seen the same thing. Like I know what you're talking about. I guess I agree with that too." Same thing with 16-year-olds pretty much being adults. Like they're throughout history, there's been a lot of periods where they were treated as adults and they were making decisions, and that like in our society we've just built things to where it is more convenient to allow them to grow up more and give them more time to be kids and give them more time to get their lives together before having to make long-term decisions. And
which is good
when I go through these things, yes, but when I go through,
but he doesn't think they're good.
Giving those explanations, I don't feel like you're disagreeing with those explanations of why in those contexts those statements make sense.
I just don't think those things are good. Like 12-year-olds going to work in the mines is not good. That wasn't good for society. Like all these cultures with child into adult initiations that he brings up, those aren't really good. Those aren't necessarily good things. He claims those things are good things that made society better and stronger, and our society is weaker and worse because of it.
I haven't seen those because every time I go look at these statements within context, it doesn't seem like he's actually saying these things are good. He's making descriptive statements about something, and then he'll go on to explain further and give caveats to these statements. But those are never clipped.
I don't know. These caveats seem more like speed bumps than walls in these contexts. So? Well, when we talk about things like when he says things like the frivolous age of 16 being when people are able to work, and 12 and 13, usually 12, 13, 15 being the ages where people are like move into adulthood, and then these same age of people are old enough to be able to make those type of decisions. But I guess they just probably shouldn't. I don't know. It seems more like it seems I don't know. It seems dog whistly more than anything else. It seems like he believes these things, and if they would happen, they just wouldn't be that big of a deal. But they don't happen, so it's easy to not take a big stand on it. Well, I don't know. I feel like I'm reading. What do you think? There's like a problem? Well, here, I don't know. What do you think about that? I'm trying to change the way I talk to people.
Yeah, generally, I think that like the way that he's making these statements within context, just normally it makes sense. Like I said, the statements in and of themselves aren't bad statements. But when we take them and just put them next to a bunch of other statements, he's making a bunch of descriptive claims that are agreeable in and of themselves. But when we put them all together, they just sound really bad. And I feel like that's what we're doing a lot. Like with him, I agree. He's a piece of shit. The stuff that he talks about with trans kids and trans people and the propaganda that he puts out on this stuff, what is a woman, is a freaking horrible disgrace of like not even making an attempt to understand what a woman is, and it's just a bunch of propaganda just to make trans people and lefties look stupid.
But okay, but like the thing is, like, he's my thing is that, like, sure, but it's the type of like sort of, oh, I'm just asking questions type thing. Well, I'm just saying a bunch of descriptive statements. Like, it's not about those things being true or not.
But I don't think it is, because again, a lot of times he does go on to actually make the like caveat of like, I'm not prescribing 16-year-olds get pregnant, or like it is good that they wait, or things like this. Like he actually makes the prescriptive later on, but the descriptives are just like minimized in context so that they do sound bad. It sounds like a descriptive that is dog whistly. It sounds like I'm saying it's just okay to be white or something.
No, I don't know. I feel like he minimizes them themselves. He minimizes those caveats himself, especially with, I don't know, the body of work that he's put together on all this type of stuff.
But that's what I'm saying, is that like with all of this other shit, where I'm talking about how I disagree with him in all of these other areas, I think lots of times we'll take this and say, well, he's a piece of shit. Like, obviously, he's an idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about here. But then when he's saying things other places, we automatically assume that this is going to the worst possible conclusion. And that now, because he's like a horrible person with horrible beliefs on trans people, which honestly are probably very common in the United States and in the West. Okay. But
sure, but like that seems like more of a problem with other people and not me, right?
Yeah, but I'm saying that we're taking this and extending it to like now he has these other really horrible beliefs that nobody else really holds, and we're extending that without ever actually having the evidence of that. It's just we're taking things out of context in order to make that point.
I guess. I don't know. I feel like everything. Sure, I guess. I mean, I'm not gonna lie that other people have probably done that. Just for me personally, I feel like everything is that I said has been based in reality, and even within context is at minimal questionable and very strange for the society that we have today.
Well, I mean, again, I watched your video where you think that he's talking about like child brides and 16-year-olds getting married, but in full context, that's pretty obviously not what he's talking about, and that he's just saying that he doesn't like that. We initially, that video starts off with his co-host talking about the fact that 16 and Pregnant, the MTV show, again, this is from like 2014, and he's talking about the fact that that show is causing this epidemic of 16-year-olds getting pregnant at a really high rate. And Matt Walsh starts talking about this to say, no, that's not the case. Throughout history, 16-year-olds have been getting pregnant pretty much always. There's even as low as 13-year-olds, and that this has pretty much always been the case. It's not a new thing. It's not a new epidemic. It's just a thing that's kind of always happened because this is when they're like starting to become fertile, and you know that 17 to 25 is their highest fertility rates, and blah blah blah. And so yeah, people take all of those quotes and they're like, oh my goodness, look, he's advocating for these kids to get pregnant, but he's actually pushing back against somebody saying that this is like this new epidemic, whereas like he's saying this is just the way it's always been throughout human history.
Sure. I mean, he said in quote, to all of a sudden act like this phenomenon of girls getting pregnant at a young age, to be considered young, 16 or 17, to act like this is a new thing and ridiculous. It's always been that way, end quote. Mm-hmm. He said that specifically. I don't know. It's just And well, in that okay, wait, video, one moment.
I'm not advocating for 16-year-olds to get pregnant, and that they should wait. And
I mean, yes, I know that, but you can say that, but also, what do you mean? What do you think he means when he says the real problem isn't that they're getting pregnant; it's that they're not married?
That he thinks that overall, not getting married is like the bigger.
The real problem?
Like, yes, like it's not even just the real problem.
So child pregnancy isn't
a bigger problem with like not just children but adults as well.
So child pregnancy. Well, I wouldn't even say that this is necessarily child pregnancy because, well, in his mind, because he doesn't believe these people are children.
Yeah, at the time that he said that, I'm pretty sure he was talking about college-age kids too, where he was talking about 25-year-olds and people having to wait until they were out of college in order to get married and move out of their parents' houses, and that they're treated like 16 like children to 25. Until that. And he says, and then that's when he says, like, the real problem isn't, that they're getting pregnant, but that they're waiting, or that they're getting pregnant outside of wedlock.
Yeah, well, 16 to 25, and also talking about the show 16 and Pregnant, and also him saying that and also in context of him saying that there's a new breed of person, which is the teenager, and then also saying that these people this age are adults, and also saying that that the real problem is not child pregnancy, but child non-marriage when pregnancy happens.
Yeah, I don't think he was saying child non-marriage. I think he was saying just people getting married out of wedlock overall. Because again, when he makes that statement, he's talking about college-age kids at that moment. And people having to go to college first before they're treated as though they're capable of making these decisions and moving out of their parents' houses and all of these other things. So
one moment.
Yeah.
Oh, you can go ahead.
Again, in the article where they put those quotes next to all of the other things about 16-year-olds, it obviously comes across that way. But in the full context of the video, he's talking about college-age kids at the moment that he makes that statement, though it could still apply to 16-year-olds too, I guess. And I don't want to make it sound like just because he says I'm not advocating for 16-year-olds to get pregnant, or people are going to take me out of context and pretend like I'm advocating for 16-year-olds to get pregnant. The That doesn't mean that I think that like he automatically doesn't believe that, because obviously there's tons of people who say like, oh, I love Jews, and they obviously don't really love Jews. I just think that everything he says in those videos are all things that I generally agree with, or at least aren't these horrific statements that would lead me to the conclusion that everybody else comes to, unless I take them out of context and play them separately from everything else that he says.
Yeah, also I found the direct quote. He says, quote, what I'm saying is that the problem is not per se teenage pregnancy, it's unwanted pregnancy that's the real problem in society. He goes on to say, it's only problematic when you're not married and you don't have a man there to help take care of the kids because he's a coward. So I don't know, it just really feels like he's saying the problem with like people who are kids who are 16 and pregnant.
Quote where he's talking about abortion, I guess. But what was the second part of the quote again?
It's only problematic when you are not married and you don't have a man in your life to take care of the kids because he's a coward.
Sure, I don't know that I that's not the only problem to me, but yeah, sure. That's
he said specifically it's the only problem.
That's
a direct quote. Yeah.
Okay. I will have to look at this, because that's can you send that to me real quick?
Okay. Here, give me 1 moment. I'm gonna make sure I have the right one, because I didn't pull all the clips specifically, but
sure.
What? Oh no. Heck. I'll shoot a freak out heck. I believe it's in here. Yeah, what I'm saying is that the problem is not per se teenage pregnancy, it's unwanted pregnancy. That's the problem in society. I feel like this is not uncharitable to read this as him.
I thought he said unwed pregnancy. Is this a transcript of it?
Sorry, but unwed pregnancy. Yeah, no, but unwed pregnancy is.
Okay.
Oh, did I misquote that?
You said unwanted a couple of times. So
I misread it.
I was like, wait, that's about abortion. I misread it. Unwed.
No, unwed pregnancy. It's unwed pregnancy. That's the problem. It's only problematic when a man's not there. I don't know. That doesn't feel like an uncharitable reading of him being like, child pregnancy is not a real problem. It's only a real problem when you're not married and pregnant at 16. In the context of talking about 16-year-old moms.
Yeah, because again, what I remember him making this quote, but he was talking about college kids at the time, from what I understood.
Well, I mean, I guess you can be in college and you can be in college and still 16 and 17.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the problem is not per se teenage pregnancy, it's unwed pregnancy.
What, do you think that's an uncharitable reading from me?
I would say that generally, yeah. I think that from what I understand, at the time he was making this argument, he was arguing that the greater problem is people having kids out of wedlock to where
it's not just people, it's teenagers.
Kids, but yeah, sure. But yeah, that teenagers includes like 18, 19-year-olds as well, that we would generally think of as very differently all of a sudden. But I in this moment, they're talking about 16 and pregnant. So I think that he's probably saying that this is, I think he's saying that it was the bigger problem to him when I listened to it on the video.
Yeah,
he was saying the
with
bigger
like being
problem
16 and pregnant
is unwed pregnancy,
and talking about how he doesn't like the idea of teenagers.
He doesn't like.
Well, I don't think he's
teenager.
Let me see if I can pull the direct quote here. 1 moment. End quote. In modern Western society, we've delayed the onset of adulthood instead inventing a new sort of human, the teenager. The teenager exists in a limbo in which we've created. We call it adolescence. Adolescence is a state-of-the-art modern invention like crack cocaine or chemical warfare. Well, he goes on to say, take a time machine back to the early 19th century or any century prior, and you won't see it or hear of it. The contemporary Western adolescent would look like an alien species to anyone who lived prior to the 1800s. He is a strange, mysterious creature. He doesn't possess the innocence or natural helplessness of a child, but he isn't expected to assume any of the responsibilities and challenges of an adult. End quote. I mean, that does seem like a pretty scathing review of teenagers, in my mind.
Yeah. I don't know. Again, I agree with these statements. Like, generally, there's been true that over the course of history, they have not been treated as kids. They have been treated as adults. And
okay, but he very clearly thinks this is bad, right?
Consenting to things.
But he very clearly thinks this is bad, right?
I don't know. I'm not. That's not what I'm getting from what you're reading. That
but Tom,
it's necessarily bad,
or Mr. Show. Sure, but like Mr. Show, he compares it to crack cocaine and chemical warfare. I wouldn't compare something that I wouldn't compare my girlfriend to crack cocaine or chemical warfare or something that I like. I wouldn't consider, like, I don't know, video games or comic books or anything to like crack cocaine or chemical warfare. It doesn't. I don't think he would. I wouldn't be like, I love my friend. I got a new friend just like the world got crack cocaine and chemical warfare. You would either think that I'm being shitty to my friend or I'm making a joke.
Well, so what do those mean? Like, if he says to crack cocaine, I would think that this is like an addictive thing that people enjoy, and that is like a nice time. What is the chemical warfare part supposed to be?
Bad.
It's just that it's bad.
I just think it's a general comparison to bad things that society or humanity has invented over time.
It's possible. Again,
and also specifically it being an invention, not something that's natural to the world, something that we made, and also
These
specifically
are societal constructs.
Okay, sure, that's an invention that we made specifically that makes the world worse. I don't think Matt Walsh thinks crack cocaine made the world better, or chemical. I don't know, maybe chemical warfare. I don't know. He doesn't seem like a good guy. I don't really think he disagrees with Israel using white phosphorus in Gaza, but.
Yeah, I'm not sure that getting more quotes out of context where I don't know what the hell he's talking about, but like the statements in and of themselves seem fine unless yeah, like the crack cocaine, if he had just said crack cocaine, I would say, yeah, it sounds like he's saying like this is like a euphoric part of your
I think actually that's why he wrote chemical warfare, to make sure that there's no misunderstanding that he hates it. Okay. Like, these are two bad things that all societies should really honestly typically think is bad: crack cocaine and chemical warfare.
Okay, yeah, sure. If this is, let's say this is in context, this is like exactly what he's saying. He's saying that this is horrible, that they are treated like children at 16. Then yeah, I guess I agree that this is a dumb statement. Because yeah, I like that adolescence is extended to 25 or so. Like, this is an achievement for Western societies that I'm proud of. But
sure,
what I took from,
I guess, but also technically, like extending quote unquote adolescence to all the way to 25 is no less scientifically back than having it at like 12 or what, at puberty age, right? It depends on what you mean by adult. If you might mean by adult like a fully grown human being, then like at least mentally, then yeah, it would usually be around like 23, 25.
Mm-hmm.
By definition.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. But like when I say that these are like socially constructed like aspects of where we put people and the responsibilities that we give them, obviously, again, like, yeah, 16-year-olds have been treated as adults throughout a lot of human history, but
yeah, but that's not good. I think Matt Walsh thinks that's good.
Able to graduate high school.
Yeah, I think Matt Walsh just thinks that's good.
Give them these responsibilities. Okay. Yeah, I'm not so sure of that. I'm not really convinced that he thinks it's good necessarily, but that so this is a thing that happens here, and this is the only reason that I even like pick up on this, is that lots of times we will have these conversations about like human history and how these kids were treated as adults, and that like that they're throughout human history things have been very different for age of consent and getting jobs and all this other crap. And if people took me out of context in those things, and they do, and they have, it sounds like I'm advocating for things that I'm not advocating for when I'm just trying to like talk about something and have like a historical context to a conversation, or just making descriptive claims about a thing. And then yes, it's taken out of context to make it sound like I'm saying something that I'm definitely not saying.
Okay, I just think that if I was gonna take these quotes out, I have to take them so far out of context that'd be on the other side of the galaxy for these things to be pretty disagreeable to your average person, and worth questioning, and also hypocritical on his statements.
It's hard for me to imagine the chemical warfare one. Like, it's hard for me to imagine context where that would make sense. So that's why I'm willing to give you that one, because it's hard for me to imagine some context where this would make sense.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I just don't think he likes adolescence, the idea of adolescence. I think he likes, also, here, wait a second. Also, in that same article, he said that, in quote, back in the old days, there were two types of people in the world: children and adults. You were a child, and then you were an adult, but you really had no choice in the matter. The timeline went like this: phase 1, birth, childhood; phase 2, adulthood; phase 3, death. Right? I just don't. It seems like he goes on a extended tour, taking people through his mindscape and his reasoning for why the idea of teenagers is like crack cocaine and chemical warfare, why it's bad, why it makes society worse, why it makes us weaker, why it makes children worse, well, it makes us as human beings worse, and why these people are old enough to make decisions like being pregnant and holding jobs.
Yeah, I guess to some extent. Like, did you have a job when you were 16?
No.
Okay. I did, and most everybody that I grew up with had jobs at 16 and worked, and I also was landscaping when I was
but he's not really advocating for 16 specifically. Well, he doesn't like the quote frivolous age of 16 being when you can work. He likes it. He would like that younger. And I think if I'm going to take specific things that he said, I guess the lowest that we know of, the lowest known age that he thinks somebody should work is 13.
Yeah, maybe. I'm trying to find. This is Mount Walsh blog.
That was a nice flip, right, guys?
It's behind the...
I wish I could skate like this in real life.
Okay, there we go. Take a time machine back to the early 19th century and any prior century where you won't see or hear it. Contemporary Western adolescents would be looked at like an alien species by anyone who lived in any prior area in the 1800s. He is a strange and mysterious creature. He doesn't possess the innocence or natural helplessness of a child, but he isn't expected to assume any of the responsibilities and challenges of the adult. Adolescents can live a life in time past only the children by emperors and pharaohs might have enjoyed. He can spend entire months, generally from June to August, aggressively engaged in doing absolutely nothing. We have to come up with new terms to describe primary function adolescence: hanging out or chilling. Our ancestors would have considered hanging or to be a punitive measure for convicted murderers, took the strength and energy of youth and used it to make strong and energetic young adults. We, on the other hand, suddenly decided that a 16-year-old is really nothing more than an enormous child incapable of being helpful and useful. Yeah, it sounds like he's just saying that they should work from what I'm reading from this. I mean, this is I don't know that I've thought too much about this, but from like the way that I was raised, this is exactly what my parents expected of me when I was like 16, is that I had to have a job and that I couldn't just like take summers off and do nothing. And I don't know if you're a bit more of a lefty, so I assume you have probably we have disagreements on labor for 16-year-olds maybe.
Sure. Here, one second. John Adams, thank you so much for the raid. I really appreciate you all. I can't do too much. I'm in a talk right now, but thank you. It's not about them being 16. It's like less than 16. Like he thinks like the age of 16 is already too old. I think that's why he calls it a frivolous age for when child labor laws start to let up. Right?
What do you mean a frivolous age? Like, again, it sounds like he's saying they are older and more capable than we give them credit for, and that they can and probably should be working jobs.
Well, yeah, but like, yeah, sure, 15, sure, like 13, 14, 15, like those ages, and possibly even younger, right? I mean, he said himself that he was working at 13 and it was not bad. It's not a bad thing. And he also, like, don't you think he would also believe that working at 13 for a 13-year-old would also be not a bad thing? Would be good?
Yeah, it seems as though, he thinks like 13-year-olds once like post-pubescent ages.
Sure,
should be working.
13 minimum, I guess, like as we know of right now. And I honestly don't think that he'd be too against like a 10-year-olds or something.
I mean, he literally says right here in Amazon's Satir Maui tribe, 12-year-old boys have done ceremonial gloves filled with bullet ants. This is pretty unique, although I've seen. Oh,
that's just him talking about rights into adulthood.
Right. So he's saying that they become men at these ages.
Yeah, but that's not necessarily what we're talking about here. It's about working.
Right. I'm saying that he's saying that these. Well, I think it's the same. I think that he's saying that they're men at 12.
In that culture, they're men at 12
because they're men.
Yeah. I think the working thing is just like a different topic. I think it's just a part of his broader adolescent stance.
Well, within religious beliefs, it's very clear in the Bible that men should work. They ought to work, and that if they do not gain something by the sweat of their brow, then they should starve to death. So I think that this is the point that he's making through like a religious sense that once you're a man, you should be working and you should be putting food on the table somehow.
Okay. I mean, I guess the 12-year-olds should be working or they're sinning.
Yeah, I do think that. Yeah, so I agree that this is the point that he's making, that he is trying to say that they are men.
I think that's kind of bad.
Yeah, I agree with this. I don't think that 13-year-olds or 12-year-olds should be working, or that they're men.
Yeah, I think that's bad. The same with like most of his other claims here that I've already disagreed with, and the hypocrisy when he's talking about this type of stuff. But if you ever bring up that like a 16-year-old could consent to starting puberty blockers, he would get on all fours and start screeching.
Yeah, like I do agree that like their brains are developed enough to be capable of doing these things. But again, I appreciate the state of our society to where we can extend adolescence and give people more time.
I just don't think he thinks that's good. I think he thinks that's bad. It makes society worse. Yeah, and that's why he believes these traditional modes of running society are better. I'm not sure if I would say that he would think 12-year-olds being seen as complete adults is better than the society that we have now, but if it excludes trans people existing, I think he would think about it for a while.
I agree with this. I obviously, again, I agree that he's hypocritical, but we all believe in like scaling adulthood, right? Like we're all okay with
sure, but like it's not about him
sex with other 16-year-olds or getting bank accounts or working jobs. We're okay with like 18-year-olds making more decisions, but like not they're not able to drink. They can't get like they're going to pay more for car insurance.
Yeah,
like,
but it's more about him being a bad hypocritical person than just being somebody who's weird sometimes.
Sure. And as I said in the beginning, I agree with the hypocrisy. I just don't agree with the idea that he like, and you, again, may not be saying this today. So like, I think it's fine, but I don't agree with the idea that he like thinks that 16-year-olds should be having sex with adults or that they should be getting starting families right away or anything like that. I think that there's that there's like more context in those conversations that make it seem differently. And so in the conversation, when you bring it up and he's like, oh, well, I didn't say that, you're bringing it up as though he wants like the 16-year-olds to get pregnant. And I think that's what he was like trying to push back on, is that he didn't say that.
I don't think he was pushing back on 16-year-olds getting pregnant. I think he was,
hypocrisy is true.
I think the only thing he was pushing back on is the idea that it's new, that it's like, that it's new. Like, I don't think he thinks that it's necessarily a really bad thing.
That it's a bad thing that 16-year-olds get pregnant.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, especially with him saying that teenagers getting pregnant, the problem isn't that. It's the fact that they're not married.
Yeah, he's saying that that's not the problem per se, because to him the much bigger problem is out of wedlock pregnancies with adults, and he goes on to like explain that like it's a full societal problem with everybody that kids are being had out of wedlock, and that's more common with teenage pregnancies than any others.
All right, sure. I mean, I don't think we're. I guess we're not like too far off. I mean, you. Yeah, and you agree with the premise of my question to him. I just should have. The only thing that I wish is that I would have asked, Matt Walsh what is an adult?
Yeah, again, because I literally like most of my work is in like advocating for trans people and the explaining the concept of gender. So I am fully on board with making him look like a freaking idiot when it comes to the stupid shit that he says about this stuff. If I was going to ask him a question, I would say, hey, the concept of like a woman, this is like a linguistic and psychological concept. Why didn't you talk to any linguists or biologists in your video? Why did you go talk to like random tribes and like random gender affirming care people or random trans people instead of actual like, authorities on this subject when you're making a video about it? Or why do you think millions of kids are transitioning? that probably would have been the first question. Why do you think millions of kids are transitioning? Why did you say to Joe Rogan, millions of kids are transitioning every year, when you did a whole video on this? You're supposed to be the expert on the right on this, and it's less than 1,000 every year. It's not even 1,000 kids transitioning.
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole bevy of questions you could possibly ask him. I like the question I asked, and I do wish that more people, that when he starts doing tours again, that hopefully it inspires people to continue asking this question to get more on it, because I think there's a lot lurking under the surface there that doesn't really want to talk about, that I also don't think he wants to back down on. In this whole thing. So yeah, like I don't think he'll have a very good answer on the question of what is an adult, or when does a person become an adult, or like when do you all that type of stuff. Or what do you think about societies where like 15-year-olds are being married off the 20 to 21-year-olds? Because that was the same. I don't know. It seemed like he would say that society. I think it's easy to interpret from here that he would say that society would probably be better than what we have now.
Yeah, I left religion within the last year, but I grew up in a very fundamentalist Christian household. And so a lot of the things that he's talking about are like fundamental to Christianity and things that are ingrained in you.
But my thing is, I don't really care about people. Sure, but my thing is, I don't really care about the fact that people believe it. I know human beings in the world believe it. I think it's bad.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I wanted to call him out on it.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, I agree with the hypocrisy point, and I think I agree with most of the stuff, that if he's saying that this is like a good thing for yeah, kids to be getting pregnant, I would obviously
Sure.
disagree with.
I don't know. I feel like I don't know. I feel like you're a little too charitable to him in some of these things that you may be missing some things in some context and in implicit ideas that he's making with the way that he's forming his sentences as somebody who's been talking for years about these type of issues
very real.
over and over again. Right? Like I don't know, it's just like once again to the pregnancy thing, like the real problem, the actual problem being not being married and not children getting pregnant. I don't know, it just speaks a lot. I feel like it betrays a lot your ideology on these type of issues. And like, sure, he can say, "Oh, I don't support it." He just doesn't believe it's not a real problem. You know, I don't support putting chocolate on vanilla ice cream, point, but it's not a real problem.
That's kind of my point, though, is that like when I say that I've heard a lot of these things over my lifetime, like where they're talking about, not early adolescence, that people are adults at earlier ages, that they can work, that they can do a lot more. Like, these are all things that I've heard throughout my entire life, but I never felt like any of them were advocating for these people to get pregnant or have kids, or that they wanted like child brides or any of this shit. And, like, it seems very that's where a lot of this these arguments are heading, is that like these are the types of things that he's advocating for. Whereas like, yeah, I've heard this my entire life from pastors, from everybody that I grew up around, from my own parents, and it was very different things that they were advocating for, that they were that they believed in, than this type of stuff.
Sure, I mean, but that would just probably mean that you have a bit of a bias in that regard.
Well, and that's what I was trying to say, is that like it could be that I was just indoctrinated with all of this and I'm just a little bit too used to the language. But I also think that it means that I have an experience with these people that to where I think I understand what it is that they're trying to say a little bit better. And
sure,
that,
but I wouldn't say that Matt Walsh is these people. Matt Walsh is very firmly to the right of, I think, most anybody that you would ever know.
My dad, my family's probably to the right of Matt Walsh. They're like Christian nationalists, and that's probably the majority of like Republicans in Georgia are like Christian nationalists, more like fascistic sorts of people.
I'm not sure if I would necessarily call like your average normie like Republican. I think they'd be sympathetic to some of those opinions, especially if phrased correctly. I would say that your average person is probably, even your average Republican's firmly to the right of these people. Or I don't know. You said you live in like
most of them are pretty much
Georgia?
On board with somebody. Yeah, I would say most of them are pretty on board with somebody like Nick Fuentes, outside of the race stuff and the Jew stuff. Like outside of that, they're all pretty much the same as Nick Fuentes. They're all like right there with him.
Oh, I mean, like, but that you just mentioned his whole bit, like his whole thing.
Well, no, most of his stuff is Christian nationalism, right? It's the whole thing that we have a problem with him on is like the race and the Jew stuff. But everything else is like there's a whole ideology that pushes him in this direction and really like twists the difference between him and all other Republicans, is that they're all probably Christian nationalists. They're all pretty fascistic. They are all like their evangelical beliefs are what push all of their political beliefs. It's just that they also fetishize Jewish people and believe that they were the ones who ended slavery and racism in America, and they take pride in that. And so there's like a massive block between them and Nick Fuentes because of all of that.
Okay, sure. I mean, I don't have like super big disagreements on that, I guess. Sure. I mean, I have more of a reason to make sure these people aren't in power ever.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah, sorry. I guess we don't have much of a disagreement on like the actual points that you were making. It was more so the like.
At first, I felt like you kind of had a. I don't know. At first, it kind of felt like you were talking to me as an outlet through for talking to other people that you had more of a disagreement with.
Well, so it's more so that your video on Matt Walsh initially was like over a year ago, and I could be misremembering whether or not you were making the child bride points, but I felt like you were. And so when you say you weren't, or at least even if you say you did and you don't believe it now or whatever, like, yeah, there's not much of a thing for me to argue against then.
I mean, I don't know, like on that point, these societies that he was like hyping up were societies where child brides are very common, and they're still common today. Like, I don't know. I just feel like it's a natural extension from you thinking that like a 16-year-old being an adult who can make these type of decisions, like get pregnant. I think you could also easily believe that he would say that it'd be fine to go along with like those same 16-year-olds being married off to like full grown adult men.
Okay, well, I was saying that
And
to
as
say that
long
I'm
as
not
those
trying to
people,
argue against anybody else by extension.
yeah,
But
sure,
still, yeah, I think that he's still going to believe in some sort of like scale of like there's no difference between what an adult who's 13 and an adult who's 70. Like I'm sure he still believes in some sort of scaling that gets you to the point where you're like gaining more and more rights and more abilities over time. That just
rights and abilities. No, I don't think he believes in that. Like over time, no. Because that would be his same idea with the gradual change between child and adult. No, he believes in a full, like 1 second you're a child, next second you're an adult. And that's why he hyped up these rights. That he wasn't just saying them to be like, I think he's like, yeah, he's being descriptive, but he's very clearly trying to paint a prescriptive picture with these descriptive statements.
Okay, so again, I agree that I think he's probably painting a picture to where he's saying that like kids should work, but we agree on the descriptive stuff that they're like capable of doing these things. It's just a better society if they don't. But yeah, I think that he is probably prescribing that they should be working at these earlier ages. But I don't think that he's like drawing that to say like now they should be like smoking and drinking and or capable of doing these things, or driving at 13, or.
Well, I mean, he does believe that they should be capable of doing those things. Like, doesn't he make a well, like drinking? Doesn't he believe that these like once you reach quote unquote adulthood that you would have? I mean, he's talked about this before, like joining the military, starting a family, drinking, voting, all this type of stuff. You're like a grown adult. He said that multiple times. Yeah, I think drinking is an explicit one that he actually said.
Okay.
Well, didn't he say take a sip of beer? Didn't he say specifically like you should be we like these guys, they should be this like 17-year-olds should be able to take a sip of beer, or we don't even allow them to take a sip of beer? I don't have that quote specifically on me. He did.
Yeah, I don't know. I Googled Matt Walsh take a sip of beer, and all I'm getting is stuff about him being upset about whoever that trans woman was who did the Bud Light commercial.
Okay. I mean, if I can find that, if I find that, I'll send it to you.
But yeah, even like I feel like him saying in these videos, like I'm not advocating for 16-year-olds to get pregnant, or I think they should wait. Like I feel like that indicates to me that he still does believe in some sort of scaling rights over time. I just think that we agree that he thinks that they should have more rights earlier on, or not rights, but that he's advocating for kids to do things earlier on than you or I would be in favor of.
Okay, sure. I guess. All right. Well, like, okay. I think. What do you think? You think we've reached a good conclusion?
I think we've reached a good conclusion. Again,
you have a family
most
buddy?
of my problem earlier on, what I felt like you were saying, I don't feel like you're saying that, and so I have I kind of takes like any want to argue out of it. No, I don't have a family. Do you?
You don't have a family?
No.
Do you have a found family? Like people that's
Like,
your
oh,
home.
sorry. Like I have like parents, and I don't have my own family, but I have, yes, I
Oh,
have like parents and brothers and sisters and
okay.
all of that.
Are they
Yeah.
well?
Yes, they're doing well.
That's good. Are you doing well? And taking care of
I am
yourself?
doing well. Yes, sir.
You
How about
eating
you?
well? You eating your veggies?
I am definitely eating my veggies. Yes, I'm
That's
doing
good.
all of these things.
I've been trying to do
How
that.
have
I've been
you
trying to
been?
go to the gym to work out more. I'm trying to lose some weight. I bought some pants of that were the same size that I wore back when I was in early college, and I couldn't fit them. And that was honestly my canon event moment where I knew things should probably change. Sitting down all day
I
on
know.
my silly little computer, it's done things to me.
Yeah, this is the first time I've streamed full time before, and this is definitely wearing on me. I need to get out in the sun more.
Oh yeah, I used to, especially when the sun was out in spring and summer. I like to sunbathe on the trampoline outside. I just I wear my skimpiest, sluttiest shirt that I have, and then I just like lay out starfish with my headphones on and just soak up sunlight after I put some sunscreen on, and it's good.
Nice.
It cured my depression.
I don't know if we've never spoken before, but I don't know if you have like any awareness of my content. We talked
I do
about
not.
about a year or two ago.
Yeah, you said
about
something
some,
to
like,
me
men's
on.
rights stuff.
We had like a small back and forth on Twitter, and I think I left you unread, just like I do most everybody. So don't take it personally. I do it to my
No,
own
I don't ever
girlfriend.
get
So
on Twitter. I had a video where I reviewed something of yours, and one of my mods reached out to you and was like, "Hey,
is that a mod?
here's
I thought
this
I talked to
video."
you.
I don't think so. I had made a video like talking about something that you were talking about with MRAs and or just like men's rights issues in general. And one of my mods reached out to you and was like, "Hey, here's this video. You should talk to him." And then somebody sent me a clip of you where they said like, "Hey, are you going to debate tomfoolery?" And you were like, "Oh, I can't. Like he's suspended right now on Twitch, so I can't talk to him." And that was kind of the end of that. I don't really get on Twitter. That's that's
Okay.
too much for
I
me.
don't know. Maybe I think they had your name. If it wasn't you, I thought I was talking to you, but I think they had your name in their thing or something. But okay, yeah, no problem.
Possibly.
That's okay.
All right. I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, no problem, buddy. Take care of yourself. Okay.
You too. Later.
Later. Come here. Come here. Oh. Hi. Oh, sorry. I didn't see you there. If you're enjoying the content, hit the subscribe button. If you don't, it'll make Boo very sad. I know a bunch of you who are watching are not subscribed. Join the frenzy. You won't regret it. Thank you, Boo.